Today I'm joined by Luke Carlos O'Reilly, an award-winning pianist, organist whose playing is deeply rooted in jazz, soul, R&B, gospel, Latin jazz, and classical music. Originally from Boston, he made his mark in Philadelphia, where he studied at Temple University and went on to perform and record with artists like Seal, Roy Ayers, Curtis Fuller, Nicholas Payton, and many more. With five solo albums under his belt, including his powerful Black Lives Matter inspired release I Too Sing America, A Black Man's Diary, he continues to push boundaries as a performer and educator. So let's dive into the music and journey of Luke Carlos O'Reilly. Good to see you in the car, in the
Great,
flesh,
great
right?
to see you. Great to see you. Yeah, I'm in transport at the moment. And my apologies, but yeah, it's good to see you. You look great.
Thank you.
You
Thank you.
look
You as
you
well. You as well.
you look you don't look like a Monday morning. I don't know, but
This is all by design.
yeah.
Luke, I mean, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Philadelphia because it's such an important city in the history of the music. Not even the musicians who all came from Philadelphia and got their start there, Benny Golson, John Coltrane, but there's a whole other um, side of musicians, veterans of the music like Sid Simmons and Mickey Roker. So were you going to hear those guys and interact with them, when you were coming up?
Oh yeah. So I got to Philly in 2000. I came here originally to go to school at Temple University. And at that time, one of the best hangs was going to Ortlieb's Jazz House. Ortlieb's was a brewery actually back in the day, and they had a jazz house kind of attached to the brewery. And I mean, it was one of those spots where it's like, not the nicest bathrooms, not the cleanest floors, I'm sure. But man, it had everything that you needed as a young musician coming up. I mean, it had music, I think 6 nights a week. It had the at the time, who we call the elders. I mean, I used to go out and hear Sid Simmons playing with Mike Boone. Mike Boone is still in the area. Sid passed several years ago. Mickey Roker, Edgar Bateman Jr. This is where Shirley Scott used to play. This is still a spot that at that time the young lions were coming to, like Tim Warfield and Terrell Stafford. So many, and I met Bilal Oliver there. So many like of the Philly young greats. And kind of like the historically like great musicians were going through Ortlieb's and hanging out. So it was the one place that young folks could come and hang, and like the older cats, as long as you talk to them the right way, they'd hang out with you, they'd talk to you. That's something that you can't find so much anymore in any city, you know.
Well, that's the thing. From what I've heard about Ortlieb's and Philadelphia, it seems like those musicians were very gracious and kind as long as there was a mutual respect, but there was no need to quote unquote vibe. I mean, from what I've heard about that, it seems like it was really positive.
It was extremely positive. I mean, I've never to be honest, I don't remember any kind of weird situations when I was hanging out with Sid or any of those cats. I mean, they would let you know if you were jive, if you called a tune and you got up there and you didn't know the tune, they'd call you on it. I've seen Mickey Roker play with some cats, and he would start kind of digging in and getting in, getting at them musically speaking, not even like really saying much, but like just, hey, do you know what you're doing up here? It was not a place that you could go and kind of front like you knew what you're doing. If you came in as a hey, I'm a musician, I'm young, I'm in school, trying to hang out, trying to learn, trying to hear you play. They were all actually very, very gracious, and just, I mean, there were times where after the music was over, I was sitting at the bar hanging with Sid. We were having a drink together. It was really really special, special, special place and time back in the early 2000s at Orleans.
Yeah, I mean, that's so great to hear. I mean, I guess that's why they call it the city of brotherly love, right?
Yep, yep.
But I wish there were more. I don't think there's really any interviews with Sid like online, really. Yeah, so what is something you when you got to hang with him at the bar? Did he impart anything on you that you sort of carry, with you to this day, and especially with mentoring younger musicians or just on your approach? Because Sid's an unsung hero.
He absolutely is, and it's too bad that it's kind of hard to, as you said, find a lot of material about him. I mean, I when I got introduced to him, I understood that he had played with Grover Washington Jr. and that was kind of his one of his big gigs in his earlier days. Um, I mean, Sid was not the type to sit and kind of give you things to work on and say, "Hey, you should do this." But he really just kind of led by example the way he played. If you talk to him about what he was doing, he would do his best to describe it. He One thing that I loved about him was that he felt that it was all music. He didn't really classify. He wasn't like, "Oh, well, this is jazz. This is good jazz. This is this other thing. This is R&B. It was just all music to him." And he loved to play. And that is great for a young person to see with an older cat, because there's some older cats who are a little curmudgeon, and they seem like maybe they've lost their zest or they've lost their love for the music. But he was like a kid. He was like a kid when he got to music. He still loved and was tickled by music and just on the bandstand laughing.
He
I mean,
wasn't like an
musically.
older, like jaded jazz musician at all.
No, no, we had a couple of those, but he just, no, he was actually just down to hang out. He was like, it was funny because he was almost as appreciative of like us coming out to hang out with him as we were for him to be hanging out with us. You'd be like, oh man, I remember walking into a spot one time, and he's like, "Hey, man," like just big like openness and love. And he was like, thanks for coming out. And I remember actually with this one occasion, he was playing keyboard, which I didn't see him play keyboard too often. He used the piano. But he's playing keyboard, and he didn't have a sustain pedal. And I said, "Hey, Sid, do you want me to grab a sustain pedal? I have one in the car." He said, "No, I don't need a sustain pedal. I don't use a sustain pedal on keyboards." I was like, "Well, why why don't you? That doesn't make sense." And he said, "Well, if I can make it sound good, if we're playing like a ballad or something, and I can make it sound good without a sustain pedal, then imagine, what I can do when I have one and when I'm sitting at the piano." So he kind of had this, it's almost like a parameter that he set up by not using sustain pedals when he was on a keyboard, but he would play so beautifully. He would play legato, he would play these ballads, and you had no idea that he didn't have a sustain pedal. And that lesson right there, actually, for a pianist is huge because I think we use every instrument we have kind of our kind of crutches, and a sustain pedal for a young musician often is a crutch because it kind of covers up the sound and kind of covers you if you're not playing all the right notes or whatever. But like him not using a sustain pedal, I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to use one if he's going to do it. And I really had to learn how to play more legato, tie things in together musically, and not rely on the sustain pedal. So that's something that to this day, I still, I still think about when I'm playing. And of course, when I think about it, I think about Sid Simmons. So,
That's awesome. I also before I interview somebody, I kind of get in the zone of like watching a video of them for like and or listening to some of them. And so I was just watching this one clip of you from COVID with on at Chris's, which actually made me want to ask you something specific.
okay.
You're a little older than me, and I've been doing this for like close to 20 years, trying to play jazz and improvise, and like I know it seems like a long time, but it's really not. It doesn't feel that way. And like for instance, yesterday I was on a gig and like I'm finally like understanding the concept of like if I want to do this good, I have to give up control. I have to let the music just come through me, whatever, and overcome those obstacles that meet, the ego or being tense. And I was watching this video of you. I'm like, I'm like, you seem so like you're letting the music come through you in that way. Is this, is this something you've ever thought about, like in that sense, just, about control to get to that next level of improvisation, just letting go in a sense?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the compliment. It's funny. I was just talking with some musicians about this last night. I was at a jam session, and there were some younger cats, and I don't know how we got on the subject, but um, I've been, being a sideman and being a leader are two very different things, and I've been a sideman with some amazing, legendary cats, and I've been a leader for quite a while. And the main thing about being a leader is learning how to trust your, fellow musicians and let go and not let your leading become forcing kind of a point or forcing a direction. So I mean, I remember about 10 years ago, I was leading a group and a bass player who was actually one of those kind of young lions at the time, Kevin Arthur, who great bass player, does a lot of work with R&B and hip hop artists, but but plays jazz. Came up with Orrin Evans and Joey DeFrancesco and Ari Honig. Um,
All
he
the
was
Philly
saying to
guys,
me,
right? It's all Philly
all the
guys.
Philly guys, all the Philly guys. And he was like, "Man, you're a great leader, but you know, sometimes you try too hard to control the music." Um, and I understand why you're trying to control it, but you got to let go. You got to let us. You got to trust us. And the way he said it with love, but very clearly, really made an impression upon me. And from that moment on, I really was started to put in an effort of not trying to control the music and push it in a direction. I mean, when you have an event coming up, when you have a concert, or if, say you're, doing a hit at a club, I mean, you got to do the preparation, obviously, and especially as a leader, you got to have the music right. You got to have everything kind of put together. But when you get there, you kind of just got to let go. And it's the same thing that I think a lot of teachers say when they're teaching you, oh, well, here's this technique, here's this thing that you got to work on. But when you get to the gig, when you get to just playing and improvising, you can't think about any of that stuff. You just got to let go. So it's something that I've been working on, I guess, somewhat consciously over the years. But now when I sit down, I just did this 5 night run. I wrote the music for a ballad, excuse me, a ballet.
Oh yeah, I
And
saw it on Instagram.
yeah, it was so much fun, man. But we had our last night last yesterday, and the musicians were just so happy, and it was really we got to a really nice place of like whatever kind of happens. Of course, we have to stay within certain parameters for the sake of the dancers. But as far as like letting people's musicality and individual kind of voice shine, I try to cultivate a space where it's like I hired you for you and your sound, and I want to hear that sound. I don't want to hear you do something. I mean, I don't, like I don't play guitar. I'm not gonna tell you how to do it. I don't play saxophone. I'm not gonna tell a saxophonist how to do it. So I really have worked on kind of loosening up my idea of how things should go. And that's when like beauty happens. That's when like the magic happens where because I can only like push my creativity so far. But if I have three other people in the band and I try to create a space where they feel like they can be creative, then we have four people just being creative together. And like, that can be amazing. You have so many different options. So it's funny though, every once in a while, like I was on a gig at Mesro in New York. I had Vicente Archer and Jerome Jennings, who were both friends and both amazing musicians on my last album, actually, Leave the Gate Open, that I released
Jerome's from
about a year
Philly,
ago.
right? He's from
I'm
Philly.
sorry,
Jerome is from Philly.
Jerome. No, Jerome's from Ohio. He's
Oh,
from Ohio.
right,
Yeah,
right. I thought for some
um,
reason.
yeah. But it's funny because we started a song, and I kind of said into the mic, "All right, sir, we're gonna do this song, and I'm gonna have we're gonna feature Jerome Jennings, and he's gonna open it up." And Jerome was like, hey man, what's the tempo? I said, "Eh." He said, okay. What feel did you want? I said, and I mean, what he played was beautiful. he had a moment of like, okay. But then after, because he's such a great professional, he was like, cool. And he just started playing, and the most beautiful things came from the drums. And it was nothing that I would have ever been able to, hey man, you should play it like, I'm not gonna tell him how to.
Are you having moments still like on gigs that are less pressure where it's like even though you know so many songs that you might tell the drummer like just start playing something and I'll just figure out what I want to play based on what you're doing. You still like you
I
do
do
stuff?
that every once in a while. Um, yeah, that's in a moment of truly not knowing what I want to play.
Yeah,
Sometimes,
exactly.
sometimes when we're on like a gig that's maybe a looser gig, um, like um, like I'm playing at Cellar Dog. We now have a Cellar Dog in Philly.
Mhm.
I know you guys have a. It used to be Fat Cat, and it's now Cellar Dog. That's a longer gig. That's the type of thing where there are people hanging out, people listening, but there's people also just kind of like there,
4 hour
and
gig, right? Yeah.
it's a long gig. So that's the kind of place where I might go to Anwar and be like, hey man, just play something. We'll find you. Um, because on that kind of gig, I also don't like being a dictator of like, all right, next we're gonna do this song. All right, next song we're gonna do is this song. It's like if cats have ideas of what they want to play, it also stretches me because they may call some song that I haven't played in a minute, and it forces me to play some stuff that I'm either not used to playing or just haven't pulled out in a while.
Yeah, if we were, you mentioned a good point before about, having trust on the bandstand and that you hire people to just, what they're going to do, that sort of thing. You hire them for them, not you don't need to tell them what to do. But if
Yeah.
someone hires you and you don't know who they are, like, do you do you do like a small deep dive, just maybe check them out for a second, or do you really like, or you just like, no, I'm gonna go in blind. We'll see. Like, how do you
It
approach that?
depends. I let them control that because say if you called me up and I'd never heard of you, never seen you play, didn't know, anything about your music, I try to find out what approach you want me to take. So like, do you have recordings or and sheet music that I can check out? If you say nah, well, not really, I'm gonna just call some stuff, or we'll just I'll have some music there. Um, I may say, well, is there anything on YouTube that I could check out from like a recent concert to kind of get the vibe? And if you want to send me something, great. If you don't, then I'm fine with that. Then I
You're
just know,
down for whatever in that way.
yeah, and then I know that you're really going into this thing without kind of a preconceived notion of how you want it to sound, you know. And I always one thing I learned from I used to play with this flautist, Dave Valentin. Um, he was a great like Latin jazz flautist, amazing composer and arranger. And when I was playing with him, he's a Puerto Rican cat. He had Steve Barrios, this drummer who was regarded as probably like one of the best set drummers in Latin jazz while he was alive. Junior Terry, who's from Cuba and like amazing bass player.
Yeah.
All these like, and then different conga players that were like just real legit. And I had been studying a lot of jazz. I'm part Spanish as because I'm from Colombia, but I never really delved too deep into that kind of music. And I was kind of feeling a little. I was young. I was in my early 20s. I was feeling a little. I don't know, maybe that imposter syndrome that people talk about. And I remember talking to Dave one time about it, and he said, in his way, he said, "Papi, I called you. I want you. I want you to play the only the way that you can play. I didn't call blah blah." And then he named all these great pianists that he worked with before, Bill O'Connor and all these cats. But he's like, "I called you. You're on the gig. Play the way that only you can play, Papi." And I was like, okay, okay, that makes sense. Why am I trying to sound like these other cats that first of all had been doing it much longer than me, and second of all, they just had a sound that was unique. Not I'm not gonna try to change my sound for one gig. Although of course I did my research, I
That's the
didn't
thing.
just
It
go and
seems
like,
like it's like almost like we put so much effort into what we do for someone to even tell you to try to do this or to try to do that. It's almost like I don't know if I want to use the word disrespectful in a sense, you know what I mean? But it's almost, it's
yeah,
just or ignorance on their part, but like to me, it just makes no sense whatsoever.
You have to show respect, you got to go in doing some homework and knowing, having an idea of what your role is, especially if you're called to do something that's like a little bit out of your wheelhouse. Like, say if you're normally like a kind of more of a swinging tang lang kind of uh jazz cat, and somebody calls you for some real kind of esoteric, real loose um uh, different vibe. You got to kind of go in understanding what that feels like, what that sounds like, or else you're gonna come in and I don't know, you may just not know the vocabulary, or may not lock the way that people want you to lock. So you got to do the research. But yeah, I mean, from Dave, I really learned that, my sound is my sound, and
Yeah.
and nobody else has that sound. I mean, uh, so I should respect myself in that manner, and not worry about trying to sound like anybody else. So yeah.
Yeah, this is great. You're making so many, interesting points.
Thanks.
I do you hear young piano play? I know there's a lot of the younger musicians who are coming out of school, like because like everything is just so systematical at this point, and with social media and Instagram and learning like the way musicians learn are so technical. Do you hear young players now who really like, oh, this person, they got it, or like they sound like they're from another generation of like, from the 60s or something like that. Are there any younger people you hear that you really like?
Yeah, yeah, one thing that I do here in Philly, I hear the lack of those Ortlieb's jam sessions. We don't have as many sessions, and we don't have as many elders, and unfortunately, there's kind of a gap. I mean, the Mickey Rokers are gone, Shirley Scott's, but like there's those like kind of right now, those 60, 70-year-old musicians. I mean, we have, Mike Boone and Lee Smith, who's Christian McBride's father. Um,
Just spoke to Mike for an hour and a half last week on the phone,
oh,
actually.
that's fine. Yeah, yeah,
He's
yeah.
he's he's the man.
So yeah, yeah. So we have a couple cats, but and Mike still hangs out on the scene, a little bit what there is of a scene. And but there's not a lot of hangs. There's not a or leaps anymore. There's a
So
Chris's
even
Jam.
Cellar Dog is not even like a hang in a
They
sense.
don't they don't have a session, and
Oh, no
know,
session.
no session, and also they're kind of, I think they're kind of working it out, like as far as like, seeing what vibe works, because they've had a decent number of New York musicians come down, which is cool, and they've been kind of using a few of the same musicians, and I do hope that they expand,
I
um
love that.
so that they're hiring, some of the, like having the Lee Smith quartet, having the Dwayne Eubanks, quartet, who Dwayne just lives, he doesn't live too far. The Eubanks brothers, of course, are uh, kind of their royalty in the music industry. So we have so many musicians. I do hope that we can cultivate more spaces for not only them to be performing, but for older and younger folks to connect. Because I hear that disconnect with some of the young people, where they don't, somebody will be like, "Hey, man, check out this pianist, man. He sounds like Robert Glasper." Man, I don't want to hear a pianist that sounds like Robert Glasper. Like, I'll go hear Robert, but like Robert, you haven't gone back far enough talking about he sounds like Robert Glasper. I mean, Robert's like, in his mid 40s.
Yeah.
Where are the cats who are studying, Cedar Walton and
Bud
Bill Evans and
Powell.
all, Bud Powell, all those different sounds. We don't have quite enough of that going on. I mean, and then on top of that, I mean, I used to teach at University of the Arts, university downtown that produced a bunch of great musicians. They closed suddenly this summer. They just, with 1 week's notice, after 150 years, they closed.
U Arts is no
So
longer
it's no longer.
it's no longer an institution.
There's nothing. There's
That's
nothing,
crazy.
isn't it? Isn't it? It's it's wild. So now we basically have Temple music program, which is good. I mean, Terrell Stafford runs it, but it's only one program. We have Curtis, but Curtis Institute is really for more classical musicians. So the whole the kind of ladder that we have musically speaking is, you know, we're missing some rungs. I think in this city and other cities as well. I mean, I hear the same thing in New York sometimes. But I mean, you know, not to be too harsh, like I do hear some young cats that like really excite me, and I'm like, oh, that's great. And this, you know, this cat or this young lady, you know, is kicking my butt. I need to go home and
How long were you teaching at UArts for? I mean, if you know,
I taught at UArts, I think, for 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah, I started during the a pandemic, so I was teaching online. So it's very weird to be teaching ensembles,
Yeah,
you
how
know,
do you
via
teach
Zoom.
ensembles online?
So what we had to do, we made them kind of embed classes. So it's like, you know, I'd have the whole ensemble, and we kind of talk about a song that we're gonna do. We everybody would have to record their parts. So I had to do a little research because I've used Logic, but I'm not like well versed, and I had to kind of get with, you know, home recording, so I could also tell them, hey, use this mic, try this mic out, and they would have to record their parts, which was in some ways a really good experience, I think, for them, but it's also a really tough time to keep them accountable and keep them on track when you're not in the classroom saying, hey, man,
Ensembles, like
you know,
everyone's got to be together and just doing their thing together
it,
and
it was
hearing
more
each
of a
other.
recording. It was more of a recording
Yeah,
kind of
recording. They call it the
project.
recording on. They should call it the recording ensemble for that semester.
Yeah, that they all were. They all were. So
No, this has been so great. Thanks for so much for doing this. Where can everybody find you? Just want to plug your website, social media, all that good stuff.
yeah, you know, right now I'm most active on IG. It's just Luke Carlos O'Reilly on IG. I do have a website, lukecarlosoreilly.com, that I try to keep updated. I know you know, I need to put some of my upcoming events on that this week. But really IG is one of the best places. And yeah, I'm kind of bopping around. I'm back up in New York a couple times in the next few weeks, and I'm in Philly, and but I'm traveling a little bit and
You're a
just finished up LA.
New Jersey Turnpike musician. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. I used to drive up the New Jersey Turnpike, you know, sometimes 8 times a week, you know, up
Oh
and
my.
back, and yeah, I
Well,
don't
here's the
miss
thing, it's
the
not even
driving.
it's not a fun drive. That's my problem with it. It's kind I mean, like it's just like I don't know if you feel it, but to me it's like dead that drive, You got to have
It
something
is
going on.
it is a yeah, that's a listen to an album drive. It's
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
no kind of scenery. There's nothing to do. It's yeah, it's
No, but once you
you're
get
right.
past, once you go like towards Newark Airport from Philly, like going to New York, then it's like, okay, this is feeling better now.
Well, my thing is I take the train, man.
Oh, okay, okay.
I take the Amtrak, and you know, I can listen to I listen to the Chopin album like every time, and I sometimes fall asleep, get up there, and I'm refreshed for the gig, and I that way then I can come back and not have to worry about, you know, driving after having a couple drinks. You know, that's my vibe nowadays.
You got it all figured out.
Well, I'm not all of it, but you know, it seems to be working for me.